Chapter 23. If there had been any doubts remaining as to the arrival of spring in the Northland, the next few days would have dispelled them. Warm winds blew from the southeast, bringing birds in ever-increasing flocks. Pintails and green-winged teal dotted the coves almost as soon as the mushy ice had drifted out. Wood ducks and sawbills, butterballs and goldeneyes splashed and swam among the reeds. Back along the sun-drenched woods trails, black and white warblers were fifing their shrill song, and before many days they were followed by other tiny singers, sweet-voiced hermit thrushes and rusty-coated fox sparrows. The winter snowbanks dwindled magically, till only a few pitted remnants of white remained in the shadow of the spruce thickets. Buds began to crack their frost-proof shells on the hardwood trees, and every day at noon it was so hot that Jim and Ida shed their mackinaws and sweaters. When spring finally reaches the Hudson Bay slope, it comes with a rush. The business of rat trapping went on apace. Jim had set up his entire line by the end of the first week in May, and went over it every 2 days. It was nothing unusual to take 10 or 12 muskrats out of the traps between dawn and sunset. This meant that he had spent all of his spare time skinning and stretching the pelt. Having Ida to keep house for him was a great help. She cooked all the meals and cut wood for the fire, and was always ready to take a hand with the skinning or to catch a trout for supper. The open season of muskrat ends May 21st. In an ordinary spring, the trapping was expected to yield 150 skins or more. This year, the water had opened so late that Jim was cheated of at least 10 days, and he had hardly hoped for a catch of more than 100. On the 20th, he had counted his pelts and found there were 92 already in the pile. "Today's the last day," he told Ida at breakfast. "Come along with me and bring me some luck. We'll go up to Sucker Lake and come back down Squaw." They got off early, and by 9 o'clock were launching the canoe on Sucker Lake. There was nothing in the first half-dozen traps which Jim picked up. Then, in quick succession, he found 2 in bank sets and 1 on a raft. From that point on, it seemed as if all the rats in Thunder Bay district had swarmed to the boy's lure. He lost count before they reached Squaw Lake, but he knew the sack that held them was almost as heavy as the jingling load of sprung traps. When they paddled to the shore at Home Cabin and emptied the bag, he found there were 22 prime pelts, a day's record catch. It was nearly 11 o'clock that night when the last skin was on the stretchers. They loaded all the skins, the dog, and a few provisions into the canoe the next morning, and went up the lake to meet Lindsay and Mary. They were at their camp when Jim and Ida arrived. As it was too late in the day to start for Waba, the quartet stayed at Poplar Lake that night. It was a merry party. The boys played their mouth organs, and the girls sang and made candy, and they all wound up with a few hands of bridge before bedtime. As soon as breakfast was finished, they were off, racing their canoes down the thoroughfares and through the chains of lakes to the Long Carry. By mid-afternoon, they were paddling down the blue length of Wabing. Joe Leake's squaw and 3 or 4 of her dusky youngsters waved a friendly greeting from the shore as they went by. Then they were rounding the last island and heading for the home cove. Their arrival was expected, as they could see from the small Canadian flag waving from the end of the landing dock. Mr. and Mrs. Vanderbeck came down the trail to meet them, laughing and asking questions, exclaiming over the size of the bales of skins the boys took out of the canoes. There was a special feast prepared that night in honor of the returning trappers. Speckled trout and fried potatoes, toothsome hot biscuits, and a huge blueberry pie. When the dishes were done and the dogs fed, they sat around the lamp and swapped yarns about all that had happened since they had last been together. Big Lindsay lit his pipe and sat in the corner, scribbling figures on a scrap piece of paper. "A pretty good year, after all," he said at length. Thanks to you boys, the winter furs and wolf bounties brought in $910, and the rats helped too. You got 114, didn't you, Jim? And Lindsay caught 80. I set a few traps, and I believe my pelts run to about 25 or 6. Say 220 altogether. If the price holds up, that'll be 275. With the bounty on Jim's big wolf, we'll take in better than $1,200 for the season. Don't forget what the skin of the big wolf will bring, Jim put in. He ought to be worth $35 or $40. His father smiled and shook his head. We won't count that in the family cash, he said. I reckon that money belongs to you, son. And that reminds me, Emil brought us some mail from town, and I got a surprise for you. He handed the boy a long, official-looking envelope. Read it out loud, he suggested. Astonished, Jim drew out the letter with the provincial seal on the top. He began to read. Mr. James Vanderbeck, Nakina, Ontario. Dear Sir, we have learned through Sergeant McLeish, RCMP, of your recent exploit in killing a large timber wolf which has been terrorizing the district near Nakina. We understand from Sergeant McLeish that this wolf is exceptionally large specimen and that you have preserved the skin. While no reward had been posted for the capture of the wolf, continued depredations would have undoubtedly made one advisable, and would like to see you properly recompensed for ridding Ontario of such a pest. We are, therefore, prepared to offer you $250 for the skin if it is in such condition it can be mounted. This, of course, would not prevent you from collecting the usual bounty of $25 from the local warden. If you wish to accept the above offer, kindly forward the skin to this office by express at your earliest convenience. Please accept our sincere appreciation and thanks for settling a difficulty which might have developed troublesome consequences if it had been allowed to continue. Yours very truly, Department of Game and Fish, Province of Ontario. Jim drew a long breath and beamed at the assembled company. Gosh, he murmured, overcome by the grandness of the offer. $250, and they're going to have 'em mounted. Lindsay, you and I'll have to take a trip to Toronto. We'll see the old wolf standing up there big as life. Their father leaned back, puffing contentedly on his dark old briar. Got some more letters in the mail, he announced. Party coming up from Chicago for the fishing, first week in June. We'll just about have time to move back to Nakina and get our outfits ready. Then there's 3 or 4 booked up for moose season, regulars most, and some friends of Mr. Warren's wants to take a 3-week canoe trip to Albany in sometime in August. It's not like booming times, but there'll be enough to keep us busy and pay expenses. I've asked Emile and the Lagarde boys to guide for us again. The family prepared for bed, and Jim stole out alone into the clearing in front of the cabin. A soft spring wind ruffled the spruce boughs, and stars burned brightly overhead in the velvet night. He heard a fox bark in the bush to the north. Far across the lake came the weird, wild laughter of a loon. Close by, at the edge of the cove, a feeding moose splashed among the lily pads. Jim was happy. His heart was full. Tomorrow they'd be packing for the return to town, and a busy summer stretched ahead. But nothing could take away from him the secret thrill of this night. Silently he lifted his arms in a salute to his beloved woods, then turned and went into the cabin. We've reached the end of this story, Traplines North. This is a story that I've had since I was a young boy. I've always kind of enjoyed having it. I find there's a good message in the background of it. Just kind of neat seeing Jim transition into a man from his young boyhood, I guess, that his father was sick, and just kind of something about how he just kind of grasped the opportunity of taking care of those around him, and just kind of kind of speaks to you as a young boy. And anyways, if you'd like to support this channel, all you'd have to do is put a thumbs up on the video and leave a comment down below of something interesting, or just say hi. I wouldn't mind hearing that either. All that does is makes YouTube promote the videos to more like-minded people that seem to show similar interests, and that would just draw more viewers for me, and that's all I'm looking for. Anyways, ladies and gentlemen, this wraps up Traplines North. Pleasure having you along, and we'll see you on the next video. See you then.